Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. Tried to find a green tie, a color that would be near and dear to Ireland. I don't own a lot of stuff that's green, so it became a struggle for me, but I did find one. And today we're going to be doing a tasting of Jameson's Caskmates series, and this is the IPA edition that I'm going to be doing the tasting on. Interesting thing about this, the first Caskmates that I bought was the Stout edition because I am a huge Stout fan and I'm not a very big IPA fan. Which is interesting because when I started drinking beer, I started drinking a lot of beer from overseas. And so there's a hoppiness in Czech beer and German beer that you would think would prepare me for the hoppiness of IPAs. But to me, American IPAs just, there's not many I like. Victory is probably my favorite IPA. And the reason that I like them is, as was explained to me by their rep, they use the entire flower, whereas the petals, I think, are removed for other brewers who are producing IPAs. And something about those flowers kind of softens that bitterness a little bit. And so, for some reason, like I say, Victory is the one that I like. But when I went to go buy Jameson's Caskmates, I saw the Stout version and I said, let me get that. I am a huge Guinness fan and I prefer Stouts. And then I tasted it and I was a little disappointed. Then a friend of mine brought a little mini bottle of the IPA edition and said, well, you should try this. And I tasted it and I thought, this is a no-brainer. I mean, the idea of beer being turned into whiskey, whereas wines turn into brandy, you know, if this is something that was on its way to becoming beer and then it took a turn and became whiskey, well, then it would make sense to me that the hoppiness in a whiskey would be a nice combination. Now, of course, Jameson is not just malt. It is also contains some grain whiskey in there. And so when it comes to grain whiskey, this will be something interesting for me to find out once I go and do the tour at Middleton in about a month and a half, to find out what they deem to be a grain whiskey, what grains they may be using, if that's not too big of a company secret. But so there are other grains in this besides what you would normally find in beer. But again, just seems like it would be a nice complement. And to me, Jameson is a whiskey that is almost like a base for something else. So in other words, if I want to make a very interesting peaty whiskey, I can take Jameson, put a drop of Lafroig in it, and suddenly it becomes a peaty whiskey, and actually a nice drinkable peaty whiskey. And so, you know, some people think of like rye whiskey as a base for cocktails, that sort of thing, looking for that herbally note. So here, the idea of taking whiskey that was aged in an ex-bourbon barrel and then putting it into an IPA beer barrel to softly bring in some of those hoppy notes, like I say, seems like a no-brainer to me. So, gonna do a nosing and tasting on this one. And right off the bat, you get that, I get a very lemony, herbally, hoppy note on the nose. You get apple, a bit of that grain note coming in, and I think that's where some of that lemon is coming from. It's a very sweet nose, and like I say, it just has a very citrusy, lemony kind of a scent to it, which is very pleasant. Now the thing about IPAs to me is that bitter edge is a little too much for me. I don't know how people drink double IPAs or, I mean, There's enough, you know, let's not just, but then I'm not really, when it comes to stout, I don't mind like a double chocolate stout. You know, I'll go that direction. So I guess it's all in what you enjoy on your palate. I'm just much more about the malty, chocolatey kind of experience you get out of stout versus IPA, which is almost like gin slash meets rye slash, you know, I mean, it's just got those herbally characters to them, but then it hits you with that really bitter note that I'm not a big fan of. Cheers. Mm. A little more of that citrus comes through. Mm. Yeah, that little lemony note comes along with the grain, but the bitterness is not there. A little char left on the tongue. So yeah, there's a hint of, there's almost more like a tannin bitter that comes in. It's very light though, but it just kind of does lay there a bit. The apple is there, very fruity experience throughout this whole thing. I think it's pleasant. I mean, this is probably not one that's going to knock your socks off for complexity. It's not going to knock your socks off for being an aggressive flavor. So if you are a lover of IPAs, you might be a little disappointed by this because it's not aggressive in any way, shape, or form. It's just a very pleasant whiskey. And in fact, I would suggest that if you know somebody who maybe drinks German beers or Czech beers, something like that, wants to move over and they haven't really had much whiskey and they want to sort of dip their toe, maybe that's the occasion for this. I like it. I like having it around. You know, I'm watching a TV show. I remember when I was going through and had bought the box set of Rescue Me, which is about New York firefighters after 9/11. And, you know, they're sitting there drinking Jameson the half the time. It's like with Guinness. If I see somebody, you know, if I'm watching an Irish movie and I see a pint of Guinness, I gotta have some Guinness. It's the same thing with Jameson, that sometimes you just, okay, I'd like to have some. And so the regular Jameson to me is a little bit too plain Jane. This has some personality to it, easy drinking. I could see getting in trouble with this actually. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from on it. Have you had the Caskmates series? Do you appreciate the stout version or the IPA version? And why? You know, feel free to leave comments below. And give me a like if you enjoyed the video, if you learned something from it. And subscribe if you would like to watch more of these videos down the road. And so yeah, I'm going to put this one in the good category. I mean, it's good enough for me for the purpose of just having a nice, easy drinking whiskey that's fruity, not overly hoppy in terms of bitterness, but does give you kind of that floral, herbally kind of a experience you would expect from something of this style. Wow. I mean, I'll get a little caramel in there on top of that lemon. Yeah, very interesting whiskey. Till next time, cheers and Slainte. Nice mouthfeel and that grain flavor coming through a little bit more.